What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we have a Billy Joel classic. We have Glass Houses, brought to us by our friend and longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Trucker Kev. Thank you, Trucker Kev. Always appreciate everything that you bring. Let's dive into this one a little bit. I have never heard this album in full. Of course, I know the three big hits off of it. We also have Billy's album, a couple before this, The Stranger up, and I have a top 10 up of best openers and closer. So there are a few Billy Joel things up on here. Before we dive into this album, I like to see what the patron thinks. Trucker Kev says, 1980, the new decade disco was still very high and mighty. A few years prior, though, new wave music, cutting edge, and some punk started making its way in bands like Blondie, Talking Heads were making serious inroads into the top 40. Linda Ronstadt actually came across this in the research, even shifted gears and went one higher with her 1980 album Mad Love, doing stuff that she hadn't really done before. Not to be outdone trying to stay competitive, Billy Joel came up with Glass Houses. Kev says what's really neat about this, though, is he took the cutting edge sounds and basically with his great band made a solid rock and roll album that was very enjoyable. Side one basically launched 4 hits in a row. It's up there in my top 5 favorite Billy Joel albums. Here's what I found. 7th studio album released in March of 1980. Number 1 in the US for 6 weeks and number 4 on the year-end sales charts with sales of 7.1 million copies in the US alone. Billy won a Grammy for Best Male Rock Vocal Performance. Was his 3rd collaboration with producer Phil Ramone following The Stranger, which I said we have up, and 52nd Street, the album right before this one. And it marked the last to feature the classic version of the Billy Joel Band, including drummer Liberty DeVito, the late bassist Doug Stegmeyer, guitarist Russell Javers, and David Brown, with saxophonist and keyboardist Richie Cannata, who after the Glass Houses tour was replaced by Mark Revere. So some of these guys stay with them, but it's the last time they were all together. It opens with the sound of glass shattering. It has more of a hard rock feel, as Kev talked about, than Joel's previous albums. The cover shows Joel poised to throw a rock through the 2-story window of his real-life waterfront glass house in Cove Neck. On some versions, the back cover shows Joel looking through the hole that the rock made in the glass. This alludes to the adage that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Pretty well acclaimed critically. So the way this came about, in 1979 when Billy was composing the songs for this album, he made a concerted effort to write and record more arena-friendly material. Here's what he said. He said, "We had now about 2-3 years of playing in arenas and coliseums, and I recognized that need to write bigger music. Songs like Just the Way You Are, Honesty, ballads, they don't always fly that well in an arena. You need big sounds. So I started writing harder edge songs, more guitar-based songs. Sometimes a fantasy, it's still rock and roll to me, You May Be Right, Close to the Borderline, All for Lena." The band loved playing it, audience loved the material that was on the recording, we were on a roll. Although Billy Joel's primary instrument has always been the baby grand piano, he revealed that when recording Glass Houses, he felt the need to stretch out with a different keyboard as his act started to fill, as we talked about, the arena and the enormo domes across the world. He said, instead of just playing an acoustic piano, I was playing all kinds of electric pianos to try and get a harder edge. Around 1980, there was a Yamaha CP80, and it just had a good punch to it, a really good bang, on a piano. And you could throw it really good, too. I threw it off the stage a few times. It made an impression. And Billy, one of the articles I read, an interview with him from a while back, he said this was his favorite album to record. So before we get started, the music's not going to be in the video, but it is going to be in the Vimeo link below. Click on that, follow along with me. A nice, concise album. 10 tracks, 35 minutes, just perfect on what I like to listen to. We're going to start out with a song I'm very familiar with, the iconic You May Be Right. It begins with the sound of broken glass, like I talked about earlier. Single went to 7 in the US, 6 in Canada. Somehow it didn't chart in the UK. I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Kev. You May Be Right. What a classic album opener. It's interesting, previous Billy albums that I'm familiar with, a lot of piano playing. You don't have that here, so right away he announces on this first track, like, this is going to be something different because the rhythm section is really important. I think Liberty on the drumming, and then you've got Doug on the bass really drive the song. And then, of course, you got David Brown coming in with that great, not only guitar solo, but he punches up the choruses some, and the chorus repeats itself several times. Billy does a really hooky songwriting here on this one. You got Richie coming in at the end with the sax. The song is just almost like an arrogant little bragging, which is kind of the bravado that Billy wanted to bring at this time, and especially on this song. So I did enjoy that. And he finishes it out repeating the chorus twice, and then with that outro with the guitar kicking in there and the drumming, emphasizing things, and it makes it stick in your head. So a fantastic song. And like I said, I enjoyed the songwriting. In a lot of upper echelon music critical circles, Billy's much maligned actually for his songwriting, but I quite enjoy it, man. Every song doesn't have to be Dylan, but he can really bring it when he wants to. What he wanted to bring here was fun. Now let's go to the second track. We got Sometimes a Fantasy. Single went to 36 in the US. The lyrics are about a sexually frustrated man who tries to convince his significant other to have phone sex. He explains that he is lonely since they are far away from each other, which is implied by the fact that his phone call was, quote, long distance. So this was released as a single. I don't think I know this song. I would have been 9 years old when this album came out. I do know the 3 huge hits. I'd read on the single version, he says, I got blisters on my blisters. Of course, a shout out to Ringo. And what Ringo said at the end of Helter Skelter on the White Album, but that's not on here. So if you're familiar with that, it's not on the album version. That was something they put in on the single cut. I think I know just the chorus of this maybe a little bit. The chorus is definitely the highlight. And once again, he uses the technique of repeating the chorus over and over to end the song. I don't know that I was really feeling this song that much. It's fine. He's singing with a weird vocal inflection, and I just wasn't crazy about the instrumentation. I mean, it's okay. It's not a bad track, but an interesting track to release as a single, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot better things on here besides the 3 big hits to put out as a single. But let's go to another one of those big hits with Don't Ask Me Why. It was the 3rd single. Only went to 19 in the US, which seems crazy to me, but the track contains all acoustic and Latin percussion instruments performed in an Afro-Cuban rhythmic style. An eclectic instrumental Latin ballroom piano solo played over the bridge section after the second verse is also featured in part of the song. Billy states that the mix for the midsection includes 15 pianos overdubbed on top of each other. Lyrically, the song follows the same thread of thought as My Life, where there is a resentment to the oddities of modern life, whereas the earlier song, My Life, takes the risky stance of creating your own path rather than the path of others. Here, Billy succumbs to the humor of its irony. Let's check this one out. Don't Ask Me Why. What you notice on these first 3 songs, they're all very different. This song, Billy said before, it's just a stream of consciousness. So if you look at the lyrics, you're not really going to get anything out of them. I think maybe the overall theme is in life, we kind of wake up one day and end up in places and we have no idea kind of how we got here. I think that's part of it. But the instrumentation is incredibly interesting. Billy is on an acoustic piano, and then on that solo, you hear the Yamaha electric grand piano. You got David Russell on acoustic. Of course, Doug is on bass, but Liberty DeVito plays maracas, bass drum, triangle, ratchet, and the castanets. So you've got all kinds of stuff going on here. And I think it makes this song very interesting and stand out because it's like nothing else so far on the album, and it's like nothing else that was really out at the time. So enjoyed that one. Now we're going to go to the monster hit on here. It's still rock and roll to me. Went to number 1. It was his first number 1 ever, the 7th biggest hit of the entire year of 1980. He wrote the song in response to critics that often described his music as adult, contemporary, middle-of-the-road pop. He felt that new styles of music were not particularly different to older styles of music, unlike what was being marketed, especially viewing new wave as akin to older genres such as power, pop, and rock and roll, commenting in an interview with Rolling Stone that, quote, new wave songs, it seems, can only be about 2.5 minutes long. Only a certain number of instruments can be played on the record, usually a very few. Only a certain amount of production is allowed or can be heard. The sound has to be limited to what you can hear in a garage. I was eating a lot of Cheez-Its at the time, and I wanted to share my shame. So it's funny because this song's less than 3 minutes as well. The Miracle Mile mentioned in the lyrics refers to a road host to many stores in Manhasset, Long Island, a location near where Billy grew up. Let's check it out. It's still rock and roll to me. A perfectly paced song, right? It's 2 minutes, 57 seconds. It's 5 verses. There's a great sax solo in it from Richie that's worked in there, and you get this thing done that quickly. It really is sort of an attack on, almost on music journalism, and he talks about this a little bit. In the bridge, he says, oh, it doesn't matter what they say in the papers because it's always been the same old scene. There's a new band in town, but you can't get the sound from a story in a magazine aimed at your average teen. Now, in a Rolling Stones critics poll, this song was voted the worst song about rock and roll ever. Billy responded to this. He said, the song is out and out an attack on the press, so why shouldn't it try to get even? I don't sit around and play footsie with the press, especially Rolling Stone. I have a running battle with them. I don't know when it started, but I know I'm not about to let it drop. I kind of dig it. So he just kind of calls out the different fads and how they don't really matter, and it's kind of all the same. to him anyway. I thought the instrumentation on the song is fantastic. The riff, you just know it the second it hits, right? There's those certain songs, there's not a lot of them in the history of rock and roll that you just know when it hits. So Rolling Stone can hate it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I thought the instrumentation is outstanding. I think they come in on the choruses a little bit and on certain lines and punch it up. It just has a really good sound. Now let's go to the fifth track, All for Lena. Not released as a single in the US, but was in the UK. Went to 40 there. All for Lena. It's funny, he shouts out new wave on it. Still rock and roll to me, the previous track. This is very new wavy. He was definitely using that Yamaha CP80, hammering through this one. Just had a great new wave sound. Once again, I'll reiterate these first 5 songs. They all have a different sound. It shows how versatile Billy really is. But this song is for Lena, man, and it's really about a one-night stand, because he tells you that in the first verse. He says, she gave me a night, that's all it was. What will it take until I stop kidding myself, wasting my time? Well, there's nothing. The chorus is very catchy. There's nothing else I can do, because I'm doing it all for Lena. I don't want anyone new, because I'm living it all for Lena. There's nothing in it for you, because I'm giving it all to Lena. And he kind of describes the situation in the second verse. And then in the bridge, I'm failing in school, losing my friends, making my family lose their minds. I don't want to eat. I don't want to sleep. I only want Lena one more time. If you've ever been in love or thought you were in love, you understand how that plays out, man. And then comes in with the outro, All for Lena. Again, a very good songwriting technique. Sticks in your head. This would seem to be much more of a single to me in the US. Like I said, it was released in the UK, than sometimes a fantasy. I really enjoyed that one. Now we're going to go to the 6th track, and I don't have much research-wise the rest of the way. You see it below. I Don't Want to Be Alone. I Don't Want to Be Alone. The rhythm section really holding this thing down. Liberty, Doug, and then you got Russell on the electric guitar rhythm section of that. Just a nice little almost jazzy thing. You got Richie coming in here with the saxophone. And I said it at the start of the song, and it really kept sounding that way, especially at the start. But as it went on, he sounds a lot like Elvis Costello. So you can see the influence from some of the music that had just previously happened as 1980. Elvis hitting the scene in 77, 78. You can really hear that there. And it's really just, again, about a one-night stand. But they've been together before. And obviously he hurt her, but she also hurt him. And he's saying it didn't matter that I felt like a fool because I forgot when she walked through the door. I said, I'm sorry, but she said it was cool. And I don't want to be alone anymore. So he says in the bridge, I'm avoiding all the cold, hard facts that I've got to face. So ask me just one question. When this magic night is through, could it have been just anyone, or did it have to be you? And will you still be saying, I don't want to be alone anymore? So clever little lyrics. I actually really enjoyed this one. And once again, I'm a broken record, no pun intended. We're 6 tunes in. They all sound quite a bit different. Now we're going to go to something that I've done quite a bit in my life, although they tell you it's not healthy sleeping habits. Sleeping with the television on. Sleeping with the television on. Starts out really clever with the national end of the national anthem playing. They hear this, because that's what happened in the old days, man. We didn't have all-night TV and 24/7, man. You fall asleep with the TV on. That's what happens right before they sign off, and then you just get the static, the white noise. And that's kind of what he's talking about here. I mean, he's talking to a girl named Diane because she's too picky. They must be out at the bar. And if she doesn't take a chance on love or take a chance on somebody, then she's going to be sleeping by herself with the television on. And then Billy, in turn, towards the end, feels the same way. He says, your eyes are talking to me, but your attitude is don't waste my time. Your eyes are saying, talk to me, but you don't want to hear a word because it might be the same old line. So that's Diane. But then he says, this isn't easy for me to say, Diane. I know you don't need anybody's protection. I really wish I was less of a thinking man and more a fool who's not afraid of rejection than that all night long. I'll just be standing here because I don't have the guts to come on all night long. I'll be sleeping with the television on. So it progresses nicely here from her point of view, Diane's, to Billy's, the protagonist, singing this thing. I really did enjoy it. I thought the instrumentation was great. Liberty's drumming was a star there, but just a fun little clever song. So next up, we're going to have a little challenge with the language, which I didn't expect on a Billy album, but C'est toi. I know I said that wrong. You were the one. It's French. In a 2002 interview with Entertainment Weekly, Billy says, quote, this is the worst song he's ever written. He says, a song written in French, and I don't even speak French. I love the sound of the language, though, so I wrote a song and got this guy to translate my lyrics. I tried to make them fit the song, but it came out absurd. I had a huge hit with Honesty in France, and I went to France and performed it. The French just sat there after I performed that song. The worst thing you can do to the French is to massacre their language, as I just did introducing this song. After the show, I asked the promoter, what happened? And he said, well, they thought that you were singing in Polish. That's when I said, this song really sucks. So with that build up, I'm not expecting much. All right, we'll go with the English breakdown. You Were the One. He sings the second verse in French. I mean, like I said, I can't speak French, so I'm not going to criticize his French. I didn't really like it instrumentally, although it did have some positives to it instrumentally. And, you know, I mean, it's just kind of a cheesy little song because, like he said, he tried to make it fit into the French language. It's fine, man. I mean, it's the weakest song on this album. I wouldn't say it's the worst song ever or anything like that. It's all right, man. Now we're going to move on to Close to the Borderline. Close to the Borderline, by far the hardest rocking song here. They had a lot of good parts of this song, but the number one thing that stands out is David Brown's guitar from the start to the finish. Just tremendous. It's just a song just written in, and I read somewhere that this was written back in 77 or 78 and didn't appear till this album, but I only found that one place, so don't hold me to that. But it makes sense because he starts out verse 1, blackout, heat wave, 44 caliber, homicide. So he's talking about the summer of 1977 in New York City, so it makes sense. And then he just goes through these different things. Get attacked by a kid with a stereo sound. I don't want to hear it, but he won't turn it down. Life is tough, but it's just not enough to hold back the tears until it's closing time. I survived. I'm still alive, but I'm getting close to the borderline, close to the borderline. So all these things are happening to him, right? He's trying to stay chilled out, but the angst is driving on him. And the second verse just goes through the same thing. I'd start a revolution, but I don't have time. I don't know why I'm still a nice guy, but I'm getting closer to the borderline. Close to the borderline in the bridge. I thought I'd sacrifice so many things. I thought I'd throw them all away. I didn't think I needed anything, but you can't afford to squander what you're not prepared to pay. So that was an interesting thing. And then he just breaks it down in the outro. But the guitar work's fantastic. A cleverly written song. Like I said, much more hard driving than anything else on this album. Really enjoyed it. And now we're already to the last track. You see it below, Through the Long Night. Through the Long Night. And I read somewhere that this was inspired and similar to Yes It Is by the Beatles. I mean, it is very Beatlesque. Billy's very influenced by the Beatles. I don't know if it's as much Yes It Is I hear in there. I hear a lot of different Beatles stuff in there. And basically, he's just going to wait through the long night with her. And describes various things about that. I don't know if I really like this song or really don't like this song. It's one of those weird songs that you hear on first impression. I'm just not really sure. I have a strong opinion. I'm not sure which way. I'll have to go back and listen to it several times. And before we get into my favorite tracks, let's look at Trucker Kev's. He says, you may be right, All for Lena, and Close to the Borderline, he thinks is fantastic and underrated. So those are very good choices. My favorites, I mean, it's going to be skewed somewhat because I knew these songs, but you may be right. I think Don't Ask Me Why is just so different. I really enjoy it. It's still rock and roll to me is great. I don't care what Rolling Stone magazine says. And All for Lena, I really enjoyed. Honorable mention, Sleeping with the Television On. I thought it was clever. And Close to the Borderline, which you could talk me into being a fave and not an honorable mention. Such a rocking tune. Now we'll get to my overall score. Like I said, we've done The Stranger. I gave that a sky-high score. I think it's great. 52nd Street comes after The Stranger, between The Stranger and this album. I've never listened to that. I know some of the big hits off of it, so I don't know how the progression goes, but I really did enjoy this one. It's not quite as consistent for me as The Stranger is, but I think The Stranger is an absolutely fantastic album. I rated it a 9+, which I very rarely do if you watch this channel. For this one, I'm going to be at a 7.75 to an 8 on this. I think the highs are awfully good. I think it's very consistent. There's a couple little misses in here for me, but that's all right. It's 10 songs. It's 35 minutes. It's the perfect length. And Billy Joel, as time goes on, I mean, this album's over 40 years old, I think it becomes somewhat underrated and forgotten in a lot of circles. So I'm glad that Kev brought this to me. I'm glad I was able to listen to it. Really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to be a patron like Kev is and support us in any way, check out the Patreon link below. They make all this possible. Until next time, guys, I will see you.